This video is going to explain all the myriad of details installing a metal roof on a house that has valleys in the roof. So the first step is shown in this picture here. You have to have 2 layers of felt on the roof, not just 1 layer like shingles. The purpose for 2 layers is because as the sun shines on the roof and it expands and contracts, it wears on the roofing felt. So the second layer is to protect the underneath layer so it will never leak. Another advantage of the second layer is that as the roofing screw penetrates through the 2 layers, it grips each layer individually. So you got 2 layers gripping the screw instead of just one, so that any water gets past the screw head, the little gasket under the screw, any moisture gets past that, meets the obstruction of the 2 layers of felt gripping the screw itself. And this pretty much eliminates any leaks from screws holding the metal roof in place. Also required before installing the sheets is the facial boards, which fasten to the ends of the trusses, and then the fascia aluminum cover that fits over the board to keep it from being damaged by the weather, and then the drip cap on top of all of that. And then the sheets lay on top of the drip cap, and this keeps water from ever coming back underneath the fascia front and rotting away the roof trusses. So these 3 things have to be installed before you actually install the roof sheeting. This picture showing the first metal roof sheeting layers being installed looks a little weird. That's because this is a boomerang house. It means there's 2 rectangular houses joined in the center by a 30-degree angle. So the angle makes this look sort of unusual to the passerby. But at any rate, the whole point here is that you install the flashing in the valleys first, and then the sheets go on top of the flashing. That makes it waterproof and sunproof. So in this picture you can see that there's lots of angles involved in installing this metal roof on some roof systems. So to make sure everything is proper, you have to do proper measurements, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. For cutting the sheets, you can use this $400 special purpose tool, and that doesn't include the blades, or you can simply use a skill saw with a metal cutting disc. That's the route I chose. Both of them are messy and noisy, and one really doesn't work better than the other. They just have different symptoms. For example, the chunks out of the expensive saw can penetrate your arms and stick in your arms, whereas the grinding disc from the disc does not do that. So the choice is yours. I went the low-cost route, simple grinding disc on a skill saw. Before we start cutting the roofing sheets, you have to have exact measurements, otherwise your lines will not come out looking smooth and blended. So this drawing here, I made this drawing to try to simplify the explanation of how to cut these sheets. At the states at the bottom here, you can measure both edge lengths and cut the sheet that way, or you can measure the left edge and use an angle. I always found the angle to be not as accurate because for one reason or another it's always off a little bit. I chose to measure each sheet using the 2 edges, and if you notice, the installed width is 36 inches, but the actual width is 39 inches. So there's 3 inches of overlap. You have to be careful and consider that while you're doing your measuring. If you measure this wrong, your angles will come out wrong and it'll look terrible. So make sure you know where you're measuring when you take your measurements. The typical screw up is when you measure a 36-inch width, but then on the actual sheet itself, you measure at the very edge of the right-hand edge of the sheet, and that's 39 inches in width. And it throws the angle off. It really throws it off a lot. It looks terrible. So if you're going to measure for the 39-inch edge, then measure 39 inches from the previous overlap. And that will fix everything. And once again, the left-hand edge of the sheet is not measured from the edge of the previous sheet, but it's measured from the overlap part of the previous sheet, which is shown here. This picture demonstrates 2 things. First of all, you notice there's 6 2x4s on this table, and the 6 2x4s allow for the ribs to stick down between the 2x4s. It gives a much more stable surface, and it's a lot quieter when it's not rattling around. In this picture, I'm using a short piece of metal roofing, so I don't have it down, the ribs down inside the 2x4s. I simply have it clamped straight. The second thing it shows you is I used a 3-inch piece of angle iron. I put a 2x4 inside of it, And that gives me a nice heavy straight edge. When I lay it there, it's not going any place. Now I clamp it anyway so vibration doesn't move it. So these two features help me produce very accurate cuts with very little effort. This picture shows the cutoff marks in relationship to the guide system. The 2x4 is 1.5 inches from the mark, and the saw sets right on the angle iron, which gives a nice steady platform. And the 2x4 provides the edge to provide a straight line all the way across. So that's how I achieve my straight cuts. I just clamp this bridge, I guess it's called a fence. This fence assembly allows the saw to ride on the fence assembly, that way it isn't interfered with by the ribs, and it gives you very smooth cuts. Here's another picture showing a short piece cut off of a full-length sheet, and you notice the ribs are between the 2x4s. Makes the clamping much more uniform and the whole operation much quieter. As you can see from this picture, the grinding disc leaves ragged edges on the final sheet that you want to use, so you have to go and take a file and file off these rough edges, because these will be rust items if you don't do that. You know, the sheeting has several layers. I think mine has 5 layers to prevent rust, including zinc layers and all that. So we have to file off these shavings so that they don't contribute to a rust incident. And the final process for this cut sheet is to paint the edges that we just filed off. I found that a foam brush pad works the best. You just dip it in the paint and dab it on the edge, and it seals the edge up quite well. So once the edges have been sealed, then this panel is ready to install. So hopefully this video has contributed to your knowledge and understanding of how to install a metal roof on your home.